Hi there, it's Scott Nicholson from Syracuse University's School of Information Studies. Welcome to session 19 in the Gaming and Libraries course. Today I'm going to talk about putting it all together. So you've bought the stuff, you've bought the games, you've done the marketing, you've reached out. It's time for the big day. What do you need to do? Now I'm going to talk about my experiences of setting up the Library Game Lab. And what that is a set of video and board and card games, and we take it around to library functions, and we have librarians work with us and learn to play games through an open play environment. So I'm going to talk mainly about setting up an open play environment and then talk a little bit later about tournaments and things like that. The Bible for doing this, especially from the video game side, is this, Eli's book, Gamers in the Library. Highly recommend it. You can also get some help over at the ALA Gaming Toolkit, which is here. You're going to find a lot of examples of programs there to get you thinking about some of the logistics behind putting a program together. First thing is space. You're going to need quite a bit of space for this type of activity, and it can be challenging to find that space in a very booked library. If you have an event room, that's great. If you have a back corner of the library that you could put up signs and says, "Warning, gaming ahead," or something like that, that can be a fun way of doing gaming inside your stack area. If you have some sort of a lobby or outside area, that can be another way of luring people in. It can be helpful for security reasons if it is in some sort of closed area. Because one thing you have to watch out for is these games, they're pretty expensive, especially something like the Wiimote. The Wiimote works with all the Wiis and can be very easy for someone to pocket and walk away with. So having it in a closed environment with doors that you can watch who's coming in and out of and what they have in their hands can help you control the stuff, rather than an open environment where it can be much easier to have things walk away. Now, when we set up our space, the first thing I do is identify the spaces where I want to have the noisy games, because you don't want to have noisy games next to each other. The first event I did, I took one table, I put two projectors on it pointing opposite ways, and I put Guitar Hero on one and DDR on the other. It was a horrible idea because the music from the two interfered. It was a real problem. So first thing I do is I look at the room and say, all right, I want to have Guitar Hero on one end, and DDR on the other end, and Rock Band over there, and the Wii in that corner. So you want to have your noise-making games far away from each other as you can get. Once you've established where the video games are going to go, you need to hook them up. Now, many video game consoles have a variety of ways you can connect them. Most common way is going to be something like this, with a red, white, and a yellow cable. This is the lowest quality, but it's also the lowest common denominator. So if your projector has the ability to use HD, you can certainly do that, but most likely this is what you're going to have, and this is what will be easy to go. Now, if you have a TV, most modern TVs have the ability to plug these three things in to, you look for at an input set that you can plug all three in. You'll have to change the input function on the TV, and you can watch it. For a projector, it's a little trickier. Projectors will usually take this, but they won't necessarily take these. And even if they do, they're going to be putting it out in a speaker that's this big, and it'll be pathetic for something like Guitar Hero. So what you need is another pair of speakers. Now, ideally, you could either get a set of computer speakers that have an input, or a boombox that has an input. A lot of boomboxes now today have MP3 inputs. If they have the little headphone jack that says input, that can work just fine. Now what you're going to want to do is you're going to get a little adapter. You can get this at Radio Shack. This adapter is going to have two jacks for RCA plugs and then a mini headphone jack on the other side. And it's pretty simple. You put the left and right in here, and what this adapter does is it takes the left and right signals, which is what these are, and turns it into this little headphone jack. And the headphone jack then can go into the input into either computer speakers that can take an input or into a boombox that can take a single headphone jack input. Thankfully, it's the same type of input that you get with MP3 players, so there's a lot of speaker systems out there that'll work for this. But I actually bought 5 or 6 of these and carry them with me, because whenever I'm hooking this up, it always seems this is the piece I can't find. And a rhythm game without music isn't very fun. So this is the way you hook that stuff up. Now you also want to look for any cables you have that are stretching across the play area. You don't want people to trip on those. You might think, oh, I'm just going to put some duct tape over it. There's actually a better solution. I mean, there's two better solutions. A fancy solution, and one that Eli talks about in his book, is that you can get some sort of a tubing that you have on the cables all the time. And then when you go somewhere, you unfurl the tubing, it's got the cables in it, it's all protected and ready to go. What I carry with me is actually gaffer's tape. Now, gaffer's tape looks like duct tape, but it's less sticky, and it's designed to be used to hold cables down. That's what it does. And it comes off the cables and the floor and doesn't leave a residue, unlike duct tape, which will sometimes leave a residue on your cables and on your floor. So if you're going to be doing this and putting down tape fairly frequently for gaming programs, take a look for some gaffer's tape, or invest in your office store. These long plastic cable connectors. Get one of those, feed the cables through it, and then it'll be very easy to set up your gaming every time. This helps once you know where everything's going to be set up in your room. I've mentioned earlier that you should consider using wired controllers instead of wireless controllers. You don't have this ability on the Wii, which means you're either going to need to have someone watching the Wii or have some sort of security where people check out the controllers to play the games, because those Wiimotes, they can walk away very, very easily. Hopefully people will be a bit more self-policing and know that if they take away the stuff, they won't have gaming anymore. Now, when it comes time for board games, don't just pile a bunch of board games on the table. People won't do anything with it. They may go over and pick up Uno because they know Uno and start to play it. It's much better to select a few board games and set them out. Put out the game, put out the components, and know the rules. This is important. You need to have someone there who can teach the games. Someone comes in, you get a few people over, hey, come on over, and you teach them the game. Here's one of the tricks I use. I actually like to put 2 copies of the same game next to each other, because what I do then is I get one group working on the game, and then a second group, I can start them on the same game, and if they have questions, they can ask the first group. And then the first group can help teach a new group that comes up. And so you get this cycle going on where one group leaves, but there's still another group, and you still have some helpers to help with the game. So I like to set up the board games. Make sure you do have the rules out there, because some people will want to look at the rules or try to answer their own question from the rules, but you need to make sure and be there and be available. Make sure you have some sort of a name badge for all of your volunteers so that they're easily recognizable. When I take the game lab out, everyone actually has lab coats, matching white lab coats, and so therefore you know who to ask. In fact, whoosh, the doctor will see you now. So we run around in these lab coats, and that allows people to identify us, and also they've got great pockets, which are very handy. So you might consider aprons or vests or something like that so that everyone knows who to ask if they have problems. Now, the other thing I'll do is I will group similar games together. So for example, if I have a table with a word game that I have a word game out, I may also put bananagrams there, and that lets me go over, if you see a group finishing up a game, and you can ask them, hey, you want to try another word game? Yeah, sure, and then you show them the next game. And that's part of what you're going to want to do, is segue people from space to space. You want to try and get them trying different things. So someone just finishes Guitar Hero, try and get them to go over and try Sorry Sliders. If you've got a group of people that are standing around just watching something, put out Tsuro. Go over and say, hey, do you guys want to try a game? It'll take you about 10 minutes, and it's very easy to learn. I think Wits and Wagers works really well for having it out, and you can go to a group that's just standing and say, hey, I've got this game. It's like a game show. Why don't you come over and try it? You can try one round for about 10 minutes. If you don't like it, you can walk away. I like to do that. I like to break games up into smaller rounds because it's less intimidating. There's a great game called Transamerica, which is about connecting rails, and the game's designed to run 3 or 4 rounds, but I always just teach it as one round. It only takes 10 to 15 minutes to play a round of the game, and then people can move on to another activity because people are going to see all this stuff going on, and they're going to get eager to try lots of it. I have found that when I've run my events, that the video games are more heavily used at the beginning and the board games are more heavily used at the end. People come in, they're rushed to the video games to play them, but then come back a little bit later and shift over to the board games because they're enjoying that social interaction that goes on with the board games. So I see this pattern again and again. Now, this may be just because I'm dealing with librarians, but I'd be curious with you and your patrons if you see the same thing, or if people just stay on the video games the whole time. Make sure and warn people a good deal before you're coming up to the end. About 15 minutes before the end, you should announce, you've got about 15 minutes to go, so you should start finishing up your games, because you don't want people to start a game right before it's time for you to close up shop. As far as the length, I think 2 hours for an open play tournament tends to be about right. More than that, and it's really going to wear out you and your volunteers. If you are going to go more than 2 hours, I would suggest having people swap out. 2 hours is about the most that someone can go running these things without just completely wiping out. So my suggestion, a 2-hour event is a good time frame to bring people in. Now, what you could do is set it up in the morning, do a 2-hour event, say, for your seniors, and then leave the stuff set up, and then do an after-school event for your teens. Or do an evening event for your family, so have some breaks between it. That's not so bad. And once you get everything set up, it can be easy to cycle through different groups together like that. If you're going to have little kids around, then you probably want to have some games for little kids or puzzles. Puzzles work really well for little kids, where you can have in a corner, you can have some big puzzles set up. Just take some of the things that are sitting in the children's section and bring them in, and that'll work very well. You also want to have seating places for people to sit down when they're not active in games. And so while you'll have seating around the game tables, you also want to have seating in areas, in little nooks. And you want to set up, this is where it would be a great place to put up some other library materials that are related to the games that you're showing. So if you're showing Dance Dance Revolution, you better have all of your stuff out on dancing so people can, if they want to learn more about dancing, they've got it available to them. You want to have food there. Now, food and drinks go well with games, just like snacks goes with the games, but with some caveats. Do not select messy food. Nachos and pizza, bad idea. Your games are going to get all messy. Cheetos? You want things like pretzels, M&Ms, nuts. Popcorn is actually surprisingly messy. I would not suggest popcorn because it breaks apart and gets everywhere. But things that don't leave a residue, things that aren't messy, water is a good drink to have. Anything else and you're risking having sticky spilled all over your games. One thing I like to do is I will have, if I'm going to have sodas, I have them with a screw-on lid with signs saying, please keep the lid on when you're not drinking it, because that'll help if the thing gets tipped over, the lid is on. But in general, I would suggest just going with water. And you do want water, especially if you've got those physical games going. People are going to get exhausted jumping around on these pads. So you want to have water available. And then some sort of little snack is always appreciated. And that's also a great place to put out signs and information about other library events. Now, as a librarian, you should greet people when they come in, ask them what sort of games they're interested in playing, and help make a good match. Just like you help readers find the book that's for them, you need to help players find the game that's for them. Someone sitting down at the game table to play a game that they're not going to like, they're going to have a bad game experience. People ask me, Scott, what's your favorite game? And I tell them, well, it actually is the best game for the people I'm sitting down to play with. Because I may have a game I like, but if it's no good for the people I'm sitting down to play with, well, it's going to be a bad game experience, and then it's not going to be any fun. So part of what you need to do is find out what sort of other games people like so you can make good connections. The other thing you can do is push people together. You take individuals who didn't come in together and try and get them to sit down at the game table. If that's one of your goals, to engage community partnerships and relationships, then you want to do that actively, getting people to come together and play games together. Also, in open play, you may have to worry about queuing. So if you have a popular game that a lot of people want to try, you're going to have to come up with some sort of queuing system so people know when it's their turn. That could be numbers that they pull, and you call the number when it's the next person's turn. They could have to stand in a line or sit in chairs in a line, but you need to have some sort of system available because otherwise it'll be this mess. You may also need to put in some rules about how long to play at a game. For example, if you get running Wii Golf, well, to play a full round of Wii Golf takes half an hour or more. Instead, what you want to do in a game like that is say you can play 3 holes and then we'll let the next person try. And so you want to have, if the game is not a short game, you want to figure out some sort of limits you can put in the game so that lots of people can try the event. Now let's talk a little bit about tournaments. Again, Eli's book covers tournaments very well. With tournaments, you're going to need some sort of you want to have a pre-sign-up ability, because that can help you get started, but some of the people who pre-sign up won't come, and some people will show up on the day of. That's just always going to happen. But having a pre-sign up allows people to get excited about it. Eli also likes to have a discussion forum where people can begin trash talking and things like that. You may want some basic house rules about respect. You know, respect the equipment, respect each other, respect yourself. These may be some things you want to put in, because when people get to playing games, they can get to cursing, and you've got to decide how tight are you going to be on that? How important is it that you maintain a curse-free environment? But, you know, this is no different than anything else you're doing in the library. It's just like every other program you run. You've got some policies in place already, so you just need to let people know what those things are, especially since some of these people may not have been to the library in a long time. When you run the tournament, you'll have to decide if you want to have someone that's narrating the tournament. This can be a great role for some of your older teens. If they're involved, they could actually be given microphones to talk about what's going on in the tournament. You saw some examples of that last weekend in Eli's video about what they do at their library. So you can use some sort of a bracketing system, or you could use GT system to get your tournament going and running. You want to make announcements about what's up and who's up and keep the tournament moving. You don't want it to slow down, because then you're going to lose the energy. People are going to lose interest. You want to choose some sort of a structure that will let you play through the tournament fairly quickly. You don't want it to take all day, as people do a round-robin tournament against each other, unless that's the whole point of what's going on. You'll want to make sure and have batteries on hand. You'll want to have, I actually keep both rechargeable and regular batteries. I like to use rechargeable when they're charged, but sometimes I'm caught and I don't have anything charged up, or the charged batteries aren't really charged, and so I have to pull out the regular batteries. But you want to make sure and have AA batteries for your Wiimotes and batteries for any of your other controllers on hand. You'll have to decide if you want to have background music. Music can get people excited, but I find the sounds of the games provide enough music. Especially if you have something like Dance Dance Revolution or Guitar Hero, then you're already going to have music playing along. And so you don't need yet another music source playing if you have some of those louder games. Make sure and try and engage the parents as well. If parents come in, see if they want to play the games. Encourage them to give it a shot. Sometimes they're going to need some nudging, but before you know it, you can have a parent and a son playing together at something. This is where games like Sorry Sliders or the Wii Sports can work really well to cut across generations and engage people together in games. So one topic I haven't yet covered is that of violence in video games. And so I will talk more about this next Monday. But here, when you're actually running the event, you need to use the same source of policies you would use to govern a violent movie, because this idea is the same. Violent images on the screen. If you would not show a violent movie on your library screen, then don't put up a violent video game on a library screen. It's the same policy. If you would show something like Pulp Fiction and on the screen, if kids have notes from their parents, then you could do something like Halo under the same thing, getting notes from the parents. Thankfully, there's a lot of non-violent video games out there. And even in some of the genres, like a fighting genre, you might expect to all be violent. But this is where Super Smash Bros. Is great because it doesn't show blood and things like that. It's very cartoony. Mario Kart is a great driving game because, again, there's not violence you're seeing up on the screen. And so, but it just falls into line with other things you're already doing. If you'd show violent stuff on the screen, then use games with violence if that's what people want. If you wouldn't, then don't. It's the same policies, and gaming is just one more thing that we're doing. When it's all done, you don't want people to just walk out the door. You want to assess how it changed them. Now, that topic, though, is a fairly big topic, and so tomorrow we're going to focus on the topic of assessment. But this brings us to the end of what I wanted to say about actually making it happen. Again, Eli's book is great, the toolkit is great, but if you have tips, if there are things that I haven't mentioned that you have found to be really useful, please go here to ALA Connect and contribute those tips, help everyone else out, and help me benefit as well. But tomorrow, we'll talk about assessing the success of your gaming program. Until then, I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.